Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the Millennium Forum for the Northern Ireland Holocaust Memorial Day commemoration, and I am honoured to be invited to lead the proceedings this evening. Before we get into the commemoration itself, there are a number of formalities that I would just like to bring to your attention. May I remind you that flash photography or video photography during this evening's event are not permitted. And also I ask you to switch off your mobile phones. In the event of an emergency evacuation, please leave the building by the nearest available exit as directed by the front of house staff, and make your way to the fire assembly points as directed by staff. And finally, given the solemnity of the occasion, I would be grateful if you could refrain from applauding at any time during the programme. Holocaust Memorial Day, International Day of Remembrance for the victims of the Holocaust and of the genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Events like this take place all around the world on or around the 27th of January each year. They are intended to provide opportunities to reflect on the consequences of discrimination and persecution and to learn lessons from past atrocities. The theme of Holocaust Memorial Day 2018 is the power of words, which is chosen each year by the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. As a journalist, words are my stock and trade. During my career, I have learned that words can kill, that words do kill. But my experience in Northern Ireland is as nothing compared to those who endured or died in the Holocaust. One of those who survived was Viktor Frankl. He was a doctor who spent time at Theresienstadt, Auschwitz and Dachau. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he said he was stripped to naked existence. His father, mother, and his wife all perished. In his hut, it was his job to pass around the medicine. He said, "The corpses near me, crawling with lice, did not bother me, only the steps of passing guards." A new supply of medicine arrived consisting of 10 tablets of aspirin to last for several days for 50 patients. I collected them and then did my rounds, feeling the patients' pulses and giving half tablets to the serious cases. But the desperately ill received no medicine. It would not have helped, and besides, it would have deprived those for whom there was still some hope. For light cases, I had nothing except perhaps a word of encouragement. Viktor Frankl died in 1997, but he left us powerful words. Words can make a difference, for good and evil. The words that we see and hear all around us today in newspapers, online, in conversations, the words we choose to use, all have an impact upon us and those around us. Let us speak them with care. This year, 2018, it is 73 years since the liberation of the Nazi concentration and extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau. It is a sad fact of life that with each passing year, the Holocaust moves ever closer to the horizon of living history, and we who remain must never forget. In our civilized part of the world, it is hard to imagine the Europe of the 1930s and 1940s for the Jewish people. Starvation, typhoid, diphtheria, cold and despair killed them, as surely as the gas chamber, the bullets, and the brutal beatings. And so tonight, we remember those who perished in order to honor them and to give their deaths meaning. Our commemoration now begins with the welcome address from Councillor Melissa McHugh, who's the Mayor of Derry City and Strabane District Council. Vera, ta fáilte rót an seo.
Gur got a Paul, agus bhaid lums fear na fáilte chur rah ahandaine an seochaniu Fáilte go cahar dara, go haire na daine ag taistal ó Cornel Ellis Doan as Erin no Ianachella. A very, very hearty welcome to everyone that has come along here tonight to the city of Derry. People who have come from different corners, we'll say, of Ireland or of the world in itself to celebrate this particular occasion. An occasion of remembrance. As Paul had said, that it's incumbent on all of us to reflect on the Holocaust in itself and the tragedy in that of the Holocaust. But as I said earlier on today when we had a reception in the Guildhall, I was born in 1951. It was only 5-6 years after the end of the Second World War. And yet in all, it was only but black and white pictures that reminded me of what had actually happened in the war. So in a sense, I was distant from it, whilst I was only 5 years away from the time that it actually happened, i.e. the time of my own birth. So one does need to reflect, and been given that opportunity to reflect as well. And it is why on another occasion, a number of years back, I had chosen to visit Auschwitz. And in doing that, it really, really brings it home to you, the suffering and that of the Jewish people and others in the internment camps at that time. In fact, I was reminded of it just the other day when I went along and visited Free Derry Museum. And in the Free Derry Museum at the present time, they have an exhibition there of the shoes worn by victims of the Troubles. They're laid out with the person's name and maybe a short story or a statement about that individual on how they died or whatever. Laid out there for us all to look at and to read and to reflect. And as I walked along there, names that I actually knew as well too, some of the people, I remembered the occasions and all the rest of it, that really, really brought it home to me once again, the enormity of the experience that we have had in the terms of our own troubles. But it reminded me so much of Auschwitz in another respect, that when I went to Auschwitz and you actually seen then both the suitcases, the clothes, the hair, the teeth of the people who had been sacrificed in those gas chambers, it really, really brings it home to you in every way. So it's incumbent on all of us to remember and to reflect. And as I talked to Dr. Stern earlier on this evening as well too, it's quite easy, we'll say, to fall into that trap of thinking this was something that happened in the 1940s. Is it something that happened in the midst of war? It isn't likely maybe to happen again in our lifetime or the likes of it. Well, I'm of the opinion that as long as people have the capacity to do it, then it's always possible that it can be done. It's always possible that it can be done. If we're not vigilant all the time in ensuring and instructing, and in particular our own young people and the likes of it, that in addressing or resolving or dealing with the problems, not only in our own country, but in any other country as well too, that we don't succumb to the type of reactions that we have had in the past, how people would end up going out and destroying, in fact, their neighbour. Very, very often too, it is their neighbour that one does attack. It isn't as if to say that when this happened in Germany that the people that were being rounded up and shipped off on trains and all the rest of it to the internment camps or to the camps where they were to be gassed, it wasn't as to say they were unknown to the very people who were sending them there. Very often it was in fact their neighbour. So what was it that actually turned neighbour against neighbour in that sense? So those are the types of questions that one has to ask themselves and reassure with or reconfirm within themselves just a commitment to showing that respect to each and everyone, and that we don't allow not only ourselves here in this country but in other countries as well too, that our futures are to be determined by that. I know that when Dr. Stern talks to you and when one does see the video and that again too, that it brings it home to each and every one of us once again, where it is that we're at even in our own society in terms of that remembrance. And Everyone must be allowed to remember and remember, in fact, the Holocaust at that time and the impact not only that it had on those people, but on our attitudes and every other aspect throughout the whole of the world. It has happened even since then in different countries and that, so that it's always possible it can happen again, and we must be vigilant all the time. Go to me, Malgov.
Gormina Margaret, Malaysia. I'm now going to welcome a representative of the Northern Ireland Executive to the stage. Mr. David Stirling is the head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service. David.
Mr. Mayor, special guests, rabbis, reverends, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honour to join you on this very special evening of contemplation and remembrance. Holocaust Memorial Day is the day for all of us to remember the millions of people killed in the Holocaust and in the subsequent genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. On Saturday, it will be 73 years since the Nazi concentration and extermination camp Auschwitz-Birkenau was liberated. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we both honour the survivors of genocide and we challenge ourselves to use the lessons of their experience to inform our lives today. The theme for this year's commemoration is the power of words. It is a very powerful theme which has long been recognised throughout history and continues to be equally as relevant today. Many of you will be familiar with the quote, "The pen is mightier than the sword," which was coined by English author Edward Bulwer Lytton in 1839. An earlier version of that phrase is assigned to Assyrian sage Ahikar, who reputedly lived during the early 7th century BC, which reads, "The word is mightier than the sword." In the period leading up to World War II, we saw how the National Socialist regime used words to create hatred and mistrust, war and the Holocaust. Indeed, in much more recent times, we have seen how words have been misused by ideologies in order to manipulate and radicalize people to carry out terrible deeds. Anne Frank, who lived close to the home of our keynote speaker here tonight, used words in her diaries to cope with and escape from the awfulness of occupation, tyranny and war, although she sadly lost her life in the Nazi concentration camps before the end of the war. Nonetheless, her words continue to both inspire and challenge us in the present day. I've also been inspired by the story of Otto and Elise Hampel, captured in the Hans Fallada novel, Every Man Dies Alone. Otto and Elise were an ordinary couple who, in the face of the Third Reich and in the heart of Berlin, tried to use what was available to them to resist. The Hampels used words. For 2 years, they wrote postcards which they left at various points around Berlin, encouraging people to resist Hitler and the Third Reich. They knew that what they were doing would be viewed as a capital offence by the regime. They knew they would be caught. They knew their lives were at risk, but they persisted. After 2 years of their brave campaign, they were both arrested, tried, and beheaded in prison. However, their words and actions are remembered and live on. In a modern setting, we see every day social media being used to propagate messages of hate or to intimidate or bully individuals or whole groups of people. Given our location here tonight, it would be remiss of me not to reference our own local wordsmith and Nobel Prize winner, Seamus Heaney. In his translation of The Cure at Troy, he wrote, "Human beings suffer, they torture one another, they get hurt and get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong inflicted and endured." A healthy society is a society where people are free to stand up, to speak up, and to challenge ideas and words in all their forms. We all have a role to play in creating and nurturing such a society. To touch on a Holocaust Memorial Day theme from a number of years ago, we should not stand by when we see this happening. The Holocaust is a powerful reminder of what can happen when hatred, prejudice, and intolerance are allowed to take root and grow unchecked. Holocaust Memorial Day allows us to remember all those who suffered because they were viewed as being different to what was considered to be the societal norm. I'm looking forward to hearing from Erika and Matthew from Foyle College about Edith Birkin, a Holocaust survivor and past pupil of the college. And I would like especially to welcome Dr. Martin Stern, our keynote speaker tonight, who was recently awarded an MBE for his work in promoting Holocaust education. I thank him for committing so generously of his time and energy to visit schools in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area last October, to tell children his story and to engage directly with our young people. And during his visit, he met over 2,500 children and young people. Martin, you're so very welcome to our commemoration this evening, and we thank you most sincerely for your contribution. We are truly indebted to you. I am aware of Martin's story, and one could not but be moved and inspired by it. Indeed, through the brave testimony of Holocaust survivors like Dr. Martin Stern, the lessons from the past are shared with future generations and are not forgotten. Some of these atrocities that we remember tonight occurred over 70 years ago, and the number of survivors who can tell their first-hand experiences are fewer every year. Others happened in the more recent past, and one would have to ask, did we learn from the lessons from the past? We must always remember the victims and keep their stories alive. We must use their words and accounts to educate others so that such persecution can never be repeated. So to close, I would once again like to quote Seamus Heaney. I think his language demonstrates the power of words much more eloquently than I ever could. He said, "If you have the words, there's always a chance that you'll find the way." Thank you.
Thank you, David. When thinking about the Holocaust, people usually think of the Jewish people who suffered. But it was not only Jews who did not fit the Nazi ideal. Hundreds of thousands of others suffered at their hands, including Roma and Sinti, or Gypsies, Poles and black people. In addition to racial hatred, adults and children with mental and physical disabilities, homosexuals and lesbians, Jehovah's Witnesses, trade unionists, political opponents of the Nazi regime, and those considered to be asocial were also targeted. Given the genocides that have taken place more recently, it is clear that humanity has not learned the lessons from history. We are now going to hear from Erika McClelland and Matthew Austin. Both are students at Foyle College, and both are Holocaust Education Trust ambassadors. Erika is going to tell us about Edith Birkin, a Holocaust survivor and a past pupil of the college. And Matthew is then going to recite Roll Call, a short poem written by Edith about her experience of the Holocaust. Erika and Matthew.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is Erika McClelland, and I am the head girl at Foyle College. I am also one of the 2 Holocaust ambassadors for my school. As a Holocaust ambassador, I share the responsibility of providing information and presentations to my fellow students about this horrific episode in our history. It is through this that we keep alive the memories of those who suffered so terribly. As a famous philosopher once said, "Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it." My fellow ambassador, Matthew Austin, and I were offered the opportunity through our school's history department to participate on behalf of our school at a number of workshops intended to educate us about the terrible brutality inflicted on the Jewish community, leading to the deaths of millions. These workshops culminated in a visit to the Auschwitz concentration camps in Poland. This was organised by the Holocaust Educational Trust. It was an eye-opening and emotional snapshot of the past, which I'm extremely grateful to have been given the opportunity to experience. You may or may not be aware that a former pupil, Edith Hoffman Nee Birkin of Londonderry High School, which merged with Foyle College in 1974, was a Holocaust survivor. This connection reinforces the far-reaching impact of this atrocity. It brings the reality home to us all. Edith was born in Prague in 1927 and was deported to a Warsaw ghetto in 1941 along with her parents, where they were forced to work for Nazi supplies. Such was the hardship of their existence that both Edith's parents died later that same year. In August 1944, she was sent to work in an underground munitions factory. But with the Russian liberators approaching her position, in January 1945, she was sent on a death march during the harsh winter across Germany to Bavaria, where the cattle trucks were waiting to transport her to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. She arrived at the camp in March before the camp was liberated in April. In 1946, Edith arrived to Belfast by boat before meeting her sister who had fled Prague in 1939. She took up home in Londonderry, where there was an established Jewish community before commencing her studies at Londonderry High School. The theme of Holocaust Memorial Day this year is the power of words. It is therefore fitting that we should mention Edith at this time, given that upon completion of her studies, she took up a teaching post in London and wrote several books and poems about her experiences of the Holocaust. Her writings have helped to inform us about this horror so that we might learn from the past. It has been an honour to have been given the opportunity to speak to you this evening and to say how privileged we at Foyle College feel at just being associated with such an inspirational lady as Edith. Whilst Foyle College may have just moved into our new school building, we will always recognise and acknowledge our links to the past. I would now invite my fellow ambassador, Matthew Austin, to read one of Edith's poems, Roll Call.
Roll Call by Edith Birkin. Through the freezing cold of the early hours to the scorching sun of the day, we waited to be counted. Ghost-like figures having shuffled through the dark to the ghostly meeting place. Always 5 deep, a block of standing lines, as hungry, weak, and tattered clothes, we struggled to stay upright. How many secrets did it hold, then whispered to the left or right, unburdening our souls? How many dreams we dreamed and told, then believing they were true, we beat a path to liberty, ate our feast, sampled the luxury of a clean, hot bath, then into bed, all white and clean. Maybe, one day. Then, an abrupt end to our deceptions, as the well-shod figure approached our rank, eager to spot a target for his whip or gun. Quick return to reality. Stay upright, head up, shoulders back, look healthy and well. The day will come when our dreams will come true. When? One day, if you stand up straight.
Thank you, Erika, and thank you, Matthew. As part of this year's commemoration, the Executive Office and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust collaborated to bring Dr. Martin Stern, MBE, a Holocaust survivor, to Northern Ireland for a week last autumn. Dr. Stern was just 5 years old when he was imprisoned by the Nazi regime in 1942. He survived the camps at Westerbork and Theresienstadt, and by a strange twist of fate, narrowly avoided a train to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. During his visit, Dr. Stern met with over 2,500 children from secondary schools across Derry City and Strabane District Council area to share his story and to talk with them. The response from the schools and from the pupils was incredible. We're now going to view a short video produced by the Nerve Centre here in Derry for this year's commemoration. It's about Dr. Martin Stern's engagements, and particularly with the young people he met in the Northwest last autumn. Let's have a look at the big screen.
A Holocaust survivor is beginning a week-long visit to the Northwest today as part of the Northern Ireland Holocaust Commemoration.
I was arrested at the age of 5 at a little preschool. And at the same sort of time, my 1-year-old baby sister was arrested by Dutch police. We were sent to a prison camp in the Netherlands, barbed wire fence, wooden watchtowers. Don't go near the barbed wire fence, they'll shoot you dead. Cattle trucks and goods trucks every week, a train every Tuesday. Took about 1,000 people, mostly to Auschwitz and Sobibor. I'm in Northern Ireland for a week speaking to schools and various other venues. I think that the talks that I give and people like myself give individually make very little difference, but they do make a difference. You know, it's hard work, it's a long road. We haven't solved this problem, and we're not going to solve it satisfactorily any day soon. The violence and the killing around the world. But you've got to do something, you've got to try. Doing nothing is not an option without catastrophic consequences. 2 young men walked in, and one of them said, "Is Martin Stern here?" And the teacher immediately shot back, "No, he hasn't come in today." And I didn't understand, aged 5, what was going on. So I put my hand up. And I said, "But I am here." And as these 2 young men were leading me out of the back of that class, I looked round, and I'll never forget the ashen face of the teacher.
We've been working with Dr. Martin Stern, who's a survivor of the Holocaust, for a number of years now. He works as part of a legacy group informing our work, and it's been an honour and a privilege to be working with him. He uses his words to tell people about his own experiences, to educate about the Holocaust and genocide. So it was a fantastic opportunity that through working with the Executive Office here in Northern Ireland, we were able to facilitate a meeting between Martin and school groups and community groups ahead of Holocaust Memorial Day 2018.
It was an amazing experience. Getting to hear from somebody that was actually there during the time is so much more enlightening.
It gives the topic much more meaning and much more depth. He explained it with lots of detail, and it just painted a much more, interesting picture of this era of history.
We can never fully understand how painful it must have been for him, but it was good to still hear the talk, and especially from hearing it in history class, we learned so much more than we could on Google or anything like that.
I thought it was very enlightening to hear firsthand from a survivor of someone through them situations. I mean, it just brings the full thing to life.
The pupils do find it very shocking, and I think when they're quite young, they don't know how to express that. It's one of the only opportunities that we're going to have to speak to an eyewitness of the Holocaust, and we're very grateful for this opportunity.
It's just kind of heartbreaking whenever you think he was only 5, and that was like the start of it for him. So it's just trying to imagine what his life was like. He must be so brave too, to go up and to talk about it when it's so personal and emotional for him.
I thought it was very interesting, as it just it was different to have someone actually in, because you see movies and stuff, but I don't know, it was good to see someone firsthand.
You were so young then. Are those memories vivid, or are they sort of informed by what
they're very vivid.
Really?
They're very vivid. They're fragmentary, but very vivid. It reverberates through your life, and it certainly reverberated with great strength through our youth.
How many names do you think are in this pot? Would it shock you if I told you that there are only just over 600 names written around you? So in other words, If we were going to recreate for every Jewish victim of the Holocaust alone, we would need to build another 10,000 of these huts to encompass all the names.
At first, we were coming over, I was very excited because, we were going into a real prison, what's mad. But then I came here and then we realised that we'd learned about it in school, we do a Memorial Day every year. You don't understand how bad it is.
In the room with all the names of the young people, under the age of 16, there's 600 names, and it was really eye-opening and shocking there was that many, because it's a large number, but seeing it like that was really just wow.
My sister and I ended up in a cattle truck. Sometimes it went agonizingly slowly for hour after hour after hour. These trains did not get priority on the German railway system. By the way, the German railways charged a fare for every Jew taken to the camps. The fare was paid by the SS. The Nazis forced Jews who were being deported to first transfer their bank accounts and everything of value they owned to a fake bank with a Jewish-sounding name, but it was in fact an SS bank. The money came from the money stolen from Jews.
It was amazing. Being a GCSE history student and having a first-hand account of that, it was just so informative, and it's amazing that he can come in and talk to such a huge number of people about such a personal issue.
It was very inspiring, but especially in history when you learn about so many people dying, all these statistics, 6 million, all these figures, but to really hear it from the individual's point of view, you can really see the personal level of the suffering, so that's an entirely different layer of history.
I think what Dr. Stirling is trying to do is to make people aware that genocide is still around in the world, particularly coming from Derry, where we have come through a conflict ourselves. I think it's important that our children are aware. The more learning they have about it, the more chance there will be that such behaviour will stop in the future.
My baby sister and I were taken from amongst the other children by a Dutch woman we didn't know. She didn't know us. She just heard that our father had killed 2 German soldiers, and for that reason she picked us rather than other children when she had an urge to look after a couple of children. In Terezin, she used the name de Jong, which was her maiden name. It's like Mrs. Young in English. She couldn't let us go to our deaths alone. She was going to keep us company. And the names were read out, and the children boarded the train, but our names weren't called. And so I missed the train to Auschwitz.
I felt so awful for what he had to go through. And I'm just sitting in his talk thinking, I can't believe he just had to go through that, and I'm reading it in a textbook and I don't even think, how terrible this was. It just brought everything to life.
He said that he felt like it was his duty to tell his story, and, it's an honour to hear it.
You have to feel a sense of empathy for him, especially after everything he's been through and how he's lost his parents, and then even after how he's dealt with it.
You can hear how passionate he is about it when he's speaking, and how he's also come to peace with it, but he's never going to forget.
And one day a military lorry, pulled up and stopped just below the window, and soldiers jumped off the back, ran round the corner. I couldn't see where they were running because it was on the same side of, my side of the street. And then I heard shouting and shots, and a bit later the soldiers came back with men who they shoved on the back of the lorry who they'd arrested, and I was told that people had been shot dead. And that it was a black market, and the Nazis had raided it.
Until recently, he wasn't able to talk about it, and then he realised that if he didn't, then everything that happened to him and happened to his family would just be lost once he died. Finding out why he decided to talk about it was super interesting as well.
He tells us his experiences and gives us insight to all the things that have happened in the past that shouldn't happen again.
Supposing somebody comes around and tells you some facts. They do not tell you all the facts, because if they did, you might realize there were 2 sides to the question. They select those facts to give a one-sided picture and make you angry. And the anger center in the old brain fires up. It takes control, and your cerebral cortex is not working. You are no longer thinking rationally. You are not looking for new evidence. You want action. You want to lash out. You walk in a crowd with a fist in the air. And the demagogue has got you.
It was so inspiring. There's only so much that we can actually learn from reading a history book, and actually hearing it from someone that went through it, someone that experienced so much trauma, really puts it into perspective that it actually did happen.
It wasn't just a name, it was a father, it was a daddy, it was a sister, it was just actual people.
You ever see Mrs. de Jong again?
In the 1980s, I took a holiday to see if I couldn't find her again, and with the help of the Netherlands Red Cross, I succeeded.
Really?
And we were reunited shortly before she died of breast cancer.
That's incredible.
But it had been a lifelong source of sorrow to her that we had been removed from her. Hatred and anger only destroy oneself. I have a large number of Holocaust survivor friends, very good friends, wonderful friends, and all of us try and use it constructively.
I see young people as key to a better future. So for those young people to be listening to a man who's sharing his story, who doesn't have the answers, but has been telling us, we need to keep on learning. We need to look back, just not to remember, but what can we learn by looking back so that we can do better in the future. This has been a great privilege to be in the company of Dr. Martin Stirling.
Well, I've been utterly astonished. I've never done a group of talks that has been anything remotely like the ones in Northern Ireland. The commitment, the enthusiasm, the efficiency are unique. I'm bowled over. It's an incredible experience.
I call on you now to speak to us.
When the Executive Office asked me to come for a week to this part of Northern Ireland to speak at schools, at a prison, at a church, at a couple of churches, one thought that crossed my mind was, haven't they got their own troubles? Why do they want to hear about the Holocaust? I couldn't have been more wrong to have had doubts. The engagement, the response was wonderful. And I learned that although Northern Ireland does have its troubles, there is also goodness, and there are good people. There is more to the story than the headlines in the British press. When, about 14 years ago, the National Holocaust Centre in north of Nottingham in England invited me to start this kind of work, the brief was, stand up there and tell them your story. And I very quickly learned a few things. The first was, it's not my story. I was a kid. I did as I was told. I cannot remember doing anything really significant of my own initiative. But around me were adults who were in extraordinary situations, who made extraordinary choices, who put their lives on the line, and sometimes lost them. That's a story. The choices they made and what happened as a result. I'm left alive to tell the story. That was the first lesson. The second lesson took longer. I was involved in a little outlying farm building where a couple of boys who'd been on a visit to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem had decided to devote their lives to that. And with their own hands, their designed and built conference hall, with the profits from the little confectionery business that one of them had, funded the beginnings of it, created a center which is small, but world famous and of world significance. The older brother is now the first UNESCO professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies in the University of Southern California, and the younger brother heads an organization called the Aegis Trust, which tries to do something about threatened and ongoing genocides. This is not all just about Jews. And there I was involved with teachers who spend years doing nothing else, with the facilities of a museum, with video material and wonderful creativity. And I developed a kind of nightmare. The nightmare was a coach of school kids arriving in the car park, marching up the slope to the center, having an introductory talk, having a few videos about Cambodia, the Holocaust, Rwanda, and so on, going around a museum, having a talk by somebody like me, and then maybe another talk by a teacher specialized in that subject. And the nightmare was that they would be walking back down the hill to the coach with a smug look on their face. We've done the Holocaust now, we know all about it. Nobody knows all about the Holocaust. You can fill a room with books about the Holocaust, but new things are still being discovered every year. Things of real big importance. We don't know all the answers. But I also saw that Holocaust education was 95% a matter of teaching history. This is, of course, right as far as it goes. We need to learn history. The reason for that has already been quoted. Not only are those who don't compelled to repeat it, but if we don't understand it, we will not be able to prevent it from being repeated, and if we deny it, those who deny it wish to repeat it. There is more to that famous quotation. At least we should be adding more to it. The worry was that the assumption that if you just know what happened, you will automatically know what to do is, in my view, incorrect. As you've already heard, horrors are still going on around the world. There have been well over 50 genocides since people said never again. Why? For that, we need to understand a little bit more. First of all, the Holocaust is a word that is mainly used for the mass murder, the attempt to exterminate every last Jew under the control of the Nazis. But 6 million people who were not Jewish also died in the same sort of process, as you've heard. Not only that, but 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, murdered in the most cruel manner. They were prisoners of war. And not only have genocides repeated afterwards, but there were other genocides before in the 20th century. And you would think the 20th century was the most lethal in history. In total numbers, you'd be right. In percentage, you'd be wrong. The further you go back in history, the more of mankind was killed by mankind. And if you dig up prehistoric bones, more of those people turn out to have been murdered than in any known historical period. It turns out that what we are studying is not just something of the middle of the 20th century. It is older than history. It is part of the human condition. Why? Well, the simple explanation is it's all due to a few monsters like Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong. But all the evidence indicates that this explanation won't do. These people were often boring and ineffective people until they were made into the monsters they became by a mass of followers. It requires understanding of much more than one individual. We also know that the instigators and perpetrators were almost all not mad in any ordinary sense. We know that under some circumstances, perfectly sane people will do horrific things. People, in fact, frighteningly like you and me. And so we need to learn about history, but we also need to learn about ourselves. 98% of people believe they're nicer than the average person. This is mathematically impossible. We are all prejudiced in favor of ourselves. In a peace education museum in the Netherlands, which I came across by chance, one of the exhibits is a pair of doors, curtains hanging in front of them. Above one, it says prejudiced, and above the other, it says unprejudiced. So you try and go through the unprejudiced curtain, and you hit a brick wall. We are all prejudiced, as I know perfectly well from my scientific training. It takes years of schooling and university training and discipline when you're working as a scientist to counter your own prejudice. But when the prejudice concerns our fellow human beings, the consequences can be lethal. So we do need to learn about history, but there is more. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. We thank you for your efforts, sir, to ensure that future generations know what did happen during the Holocaust. We're indebted to you for your contribution tonight, and I'm sure that the film, which we saw earlier, will serve as a record for posterity. And I'm also certain that all of those whom you met during your visit will never forget the meeting or the message which you shared with them. I'm now going to call on Rabbi David Singer to introduce a piece of music to be played by the Lowry String Quartet entitled Ani MaAmin, which holds its very special place in the Jewish community as it was composed on a train to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Rabbi.
The famous rabbi and philosopher, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, known as the Rambam, set out the 13 principles of the Jewish faith. Each one begins with the words, Ani MaAmin, I believe, Be'emunah shlema, in perfect faith. Here is the true story of one tune set to these words that has survived. Inside the crowded cars, over the clatter of the cattle cars' wheels, rose the sounds of people gasping, sighing, weeping, and dying. One could hear the stifled cries of children crushed together. But in one such car, headed toward the infamous death camp Treblinka, the sound of singing could be heard. Azriel David Fastig, the cantor of the Mojitzer Rebbe, was singing these words to a tune he composed. At first, it was just in his car, but soon spread to the other cars until the whole trainload was singing Ani MaAmin Be'emunah shlema, בביאת המשיח, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. I believe in perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah, and even though he may tarry, still I will await his coming. Rabbi Israel David Fastig was noted for his exceptional voice throughout Warsaw. In spite of the terrible decrees, the yellow patch and the ghettos, most Jews could not fathom what was about to befall them. Gradually, the listening ears of those around him joined his song, at first quietly, but gradually growing louder and louder. Soon the song spread from car to car. Every mouth that could still draw a breath joined in Azriel's haunting melody. His eyes red from crying and his cheeks wet with tears. Cantor Fastig tore a piece from his own shirt, jotted down the notes from his new composition, and then he proclaimed, I will give half my share in the world to come to the person who will take my song, to the saintly Mojitzer Rebbe, who had escaped to the shores of the United States. In hushed silence, there descended upon the train, and two young men appeared, promising to bring the song to the Rebbe at any cost. Bidding farewell to their brothers and sisters, they jumped out of a hole they made in the train's roof. One was killed as he jumped, but the other miraculously survived, and clutching to the shirt, kept the melody alive. It was on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, after the war, on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, and the Mojitzer Rebbe's synagogue in New York was filled to capacity. As the Rebbe began singing the Ani MaAmin, the crowd wept bitterly, and the Rebbe trembled and declared, on their journey to the gas chambers, this song was born from the ashes of millions, and it will be to this song that the Jewish people will march as they greet the Mashiach, the Messiah, the final redemption. Ani MaAmin, I believe.
And now, to help us to remember all of the victims of the Holocaust and other genocides, we will read the Statement of Commitment. The statement was adapted from the Declaration of the Stockholm Conference, which was signed by governments from around the world and pledged remembrance of the Holocaust and support for education and research to ensure future generations would learn its tragic lessons. Representatives from each of the groups persecuted during the Holocaust will read part of the statement. I'm going to ask Shoshana Appleton, Richard Moore, Molly Liggett, Emer Willis, Gabriel Carton, and Dr. Wasif Naim to come to the stage. The Statement of Commitment reminds us of our responsibility as individuals to stand against the attitudes and the actions which allow the evils of Holocaust and genocide to happen. Once our readers have read the first 6 parts of the statement, I will ask all of you to join with us in reading the last section of the statement to show our personal commitment to keep the memory of the victims of the Holocaust alive and to work to eliminate prejudice and discrimination. You will find the words of commitment printed in your programme.
We recognize that the Holocaust shook the foundations of modern civilization. Its unprecedented character and horror will always hold universal meaning.
We believe the Holocaust must have a permanent place in our nation's collective memory. We honour the survivors still with us and reaffirm our shared goals of mutual understanding and justice.
We must make sure that future generations understand the causes of the Holocaust and reflect upon its consequences. We vow to remember the victims of Nazi persecution and of all genocide.
We value the sacrifices of those who have risked their lives to protect or rescue victims as a touchstone of the human capacity for good in the face of evil.
We recognise that humanity is still scarred by the belief that race, religion, disability, or sexual orientation make some people's lives worth less than others. Genocide, anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination still continue. We have a shared responsibility to fight these evils.
We pledge to strengthen our efforts to promote education and research about the Holocaust and other genocides. We will do our utmost to make sure that the lessons of such events are fully learnt.
And let us all say together, we will continue to encourage Holocaust remembrance by holding an annual UK Holocaust Memorial Day. We condemn the evils of prejudice and discrimination. We value a free, tolerant, and democratic society. We now come to that part of our evening where our thoughts focus especially on remembrance of those who perished in the Holocaust and other more recent genocides. I'm going to ask Jane Hurwitz to light the candle in memory of those victims. Could I ask you all please to stand? now going to invite the Rabbi, David Singer, to sing a prayer for the repose of the souls of the departed in Hebrew, after which he will read the prayer in English. And after the prayer, Lucy Granite will read We Remember Them. Rabbi.
Eile molei rachamim shechein b'merayimim amitei menucha nechayono al kanfei hashechino b'malos kedoshim utahoyerim kezohar harakia mazhirim esakol הנשמות של 6 מיליוני היהודים חללי השואה מאירופה שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו ושנזבו על קדוש השם ביד המרצחים הגרמנים ועוזריהם ושאר העמים. לא כן בעל רחמים יסתירם בססר כנפיו ליעלמים ויצרור בצרור החיים אס נשמעיהם אדוני הוא נחלתם מגן עדן תימון חסם ויעמדו לגויר עולם לקיץ היומין ונאמר אמן. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, in the lofty levels of the holy and pure ones, who shine like the glow of the firmament. For the souls of the holy and pure ones who were killed, murdered, slaughtered, burned, drowned, and strangled in Auschwitz, Chelmno, Treblinka, Sobibor, Majdanek, and Belzec, for the sanctification of the name. Through the hands of the German oppressors, may their name and memory be obliterated. The whole congregation is praying on their behalf in remembrance of their souls. May their resting peace be in the Garden of Eden. May the Master of Mercy shelter them in the shelter of his wings for eternity. and may he bind their souls in the bond of life. The Lord is their heritage, and may they repose in peace on their resting places. And let us say, Amen.
We remember them. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for now they are part of us as we remember them.
Thank you. You may be seated. The Education Authority Music Service Youth Orchestra will now play a piece entitled Something Inside So Strong. Following that, Rabbi Singer will blow the shofar to symbolize the end of our act of commemoration. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we now come to the blowing of the shofar to symbolize the end of our act of commemoration. We thank you for your participation tonight. We hope that it has been a fitting remembrance for all the victims of the Holocaust and indeed those who have suffered in more recent genocides. Let each of us draw inspiration from those who survived, and let all of us strive to build our personal bridges over our prejudices towards a better future for everyone in our society. Everyone is invited now to join us for some refreshments. Good evening and shalom.